Shalom, everybody. This is Olivier Melnick with Shalom in Messiah Ministries, my new ministry that I started just a few weeks ago. And you'll see a QR code on your screen for a little bit. And when you see that, you can scan it and you can follow us. There's options of what you can choose to receive for free. You can also have an option to support our ministry. We rely on support from people like you, so we appreciate that if you can, if the Lord leads you to do so, to support our ministry. Again, this is the new ministry to focus on reaching out to the Jewish people and equipping Christians to understand anti-Semitism, fight it, and reach out to the Jewish community with the love of Messiah. It's a very important ministry for such a time as this. So the question I have for today is the state of Palestine a possibility in our lifetime? That's the question I want to ask. So stay with me to find out. Of course, always good to subscribe and give us the thumbs up. It helps us with exposure on YouTube, and we need it. And also turn the notifications on. So, looking back over the last few months, over 4 months ago, over 4 months after Hamas murdered 1,200 innocent Israeli civilians and took over 200 hostages inside the Gaza Strip, the current U.S. administration is contemplating the idea of recognizing the state of Palestine officially. I mean, could there be a worse time to even think about doing that? Yet, this is what's happening. Again, they are pushing for the two-state solution, quote unquote, that writer Elliot Abrams of Tablet magazine rightfully recently called in an article the two-state delusion. These days, it seems that most of the world is asking for a two-state solution, mostly with the hope that it would bring the Gaza war to an end. Do you think that would work? What are the requirements for Palestine to be recognized and for the region to be split into a Jewish state and a Palestinian state? Is that even possible? That's what I want to look at today. Number one, Palestinians must be a real people group for that to work. Prior to 1948, the Palestinian narrative was not much of a narrative at all. Those calling themselves Palestinians today were calling themselves Arabs back then, and for very good reasons. This is exactly who they were and who they are today. The claim that Palestinians are descendants of the Canaanites is a false claim, historically. The Canaanites, along with many other people groups, disappeared a long, long time ago. Today, Palestinians speak Arabic, not Palestinian. Their customs and traditions, beautiful that they are Arab traditions, not Palestinian. Incidentally, the word Palestine, introduced by Emperor Hadrian in the 1st century to humiliate the Jewish people, was never meant to describe anything but a landmass in the Middle East. It was hijacked by Yasser Arafat and repurposed over several decades to introduce a new politically charged narrative. Palestinian coins from decades prior to 1948 all have the two Hebrew letters Aleph and Yod, initials for Eretz Yisrael, meaning the land of Israel. Palestine was nothing but a geographical description of the land of Israel. To be sure, Palestinians are real people with real needs, the first of those needs being a belief in Yeshua for their salvation. What they are not, though, is an indigenous people from the land of Canaan, later known as Palestine, and known today as the State of Israel. None of this, friends, none of this is meant to devalue their worth as human beings in God's eyes, but simply to assess factual truth. Number two, Palestinians must want peace with Israel. That's a big one. Another elephant in the room. That is the ongoing desire from most Palestinians to eradicate all Israelis from Israel. I'm not saying that all Palestinians have genocidal tendencies, but considering that Hamas does want all Jews dead and that 70% of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip voted for Hamas, one has to wonder what the real agenda is when peace is discussed or even mentioned. Incidentally, about 90% of all Palestinians want more moderate US-backed Mahmoud Abbas to resign from being the leader of Fatah. Well, many describe him as a moderate. I question his political integrity simply from the fact that he is in his 19th year of a 4-year term as leader of Fatah. As to his academic integrity, I question it even more, considering that his doctoral dissertation covered such topics as anti-Zionism and Holocaust denial. You heard it, Holocaust denial. Additionally, the motto, "From the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free," does not inspire peace, but genocide, something that all millennials and Gen Zs around the world should know as they chant that motto of annihilation, thinking that they're promoting social justice. Number 3, Palestinians must properly use funds sent to them for humanitarian reasons. Many countries of the world for decades have sent money to the Palestinian Authority for humanitarian relief. And it's the right thing to do. Almost all of the money allocated to Gaza was repurposed to build tunnels. We know that now. Some of those tunnels leading directly to the area of October 7th, 2023, terrorist attack on Israel. The recent discovery and exposure of UNRWA's mishandling of funds and even participation in the attack could be a game changer if it's done right. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency, the UNRWA, had already lost funding from 16 countries in light of their involvement on October 7th. It might only be 10% of the 12,000 UNRWA employees in Gaza who had ties to the terror attack, but that is still 1,200 people. That's a lot of people. It's probably more. Frankly, the numbers do not matter as much as the fact that the misuse of funds has probably taken place for a longer time than we realize. Not to mention how Hamas positions their weapons in mosques, hospitals, and schools all over the Gaza Strip. History has shown us that the desire for peaceful coexistence is more of a reality on the Israeli side than it is on the Palestinian side. The facts are here, in spite of the media bias, the UN bias, the academic bias, and the Hollywood bias. There are a lot more Arabs in Israel today than there were prior to 1948, even though the Palestinians call May 14, 1948 the Nakba, or catastrophe in Arabic. The other side of that coin is that there are still only 15 million Jews around the world today, when there were 18 million before the Holocaust. Let that sink in. It's also known as the Shoah, which is also meaning catastrophe, but in Hebrew. Which was a real catastrophe of the two? Let the numbers speak, not the media. And then you can decide when and where the crimes against humanity were really committed. It is impossible to come to a peaceful agreement of any sort when one side respects the sanctity of all human lives and the other side worships death. For those who keep demanding a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, by the way, let me remind you that there has been a ceasefire since 2005, when Hamas took full control of the area until October 6, 2023. That ceasefire was broken by Hamas on October 7, 2023, when Hamas murdered 1,200 Israelis and took over 200 hostages. They created a monster that will be very hard to control, because as much as the Israelis worked with Palestinians and tolerated a less than ideal status quo, the thin trust that existed between the two groups has now vanished. It is going to be a while before Israel trusts the Palestinians again, and this is mostly going to hurt the Palestinian side. Based on these criteria that appear far from being within reach, a Palestinian state seems very unlikely. This being said, there will be a real peace in Israel one day. That is when Sar Shalom, the Prince of Peace, returns to reign in Jerusalem from the throne of King David. His name is Yeshua, Jesus, and only he has the power to make the two, Arabs and Jews, into one new man, as we read in the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament, in Ephesians chapter 2. Until then, we ought to do the best we can to introduce people, Jews and Arabs and all people, to Yeshua and his message of salvation, as read in Isaiah 52:13 through 53:12. See, he came 2,000 years ago to die for all people, Jews, Arabs, and the rest of humanity. He rose again and ascended to heaven. And today, he awaits his own return to take charge on earth from Jerusalem. All that one has to do is to believe in his atonement as a free gift and become part of God's family. Yeah, it's that simple. I have seen Jews and Arabs getting along in Yeshua. It is a beautiful sight, and it should really be one of our main focal points until Yeshua returns. Until next time, shalom and be blessed.